You know what Bitmoji stories are, right? They're AI stories created on Snapchat you make with your Bitmoji character. Subscribe to the Bitmoji Stories channel, and there you go, your daily Bitmoji stories, featuring you as the main lead. Every Snapchat user gets the same story as others. It's just that the characters that they are and the person they had last a conversation with or snap spree with. Okay, so here's my story. I got this secondhand phone from a repair shop after losing my previous one. I did not have enough money, and my parents denied buying me a new phone after just a few months. So I took all my savings allowance and was only able to afford a secondhand device. It did not look half bad, the camera quality was also good, and so I immediately installed Snapchat on the device. I was obsessed with Snapchat even on my previous phone, and I have already subscribed to Bitmoji stories on my Snapchat. After upgrading the phone's outer cover by adding a few of the latest designs, it was finally ready for me to use. That day during the recess, when I opened my Snapchat and was scrolling through it, I opened the Bitmoji stories. And it was a bit weird that instead of my last interactive person, the story was in the fifth person. The story started with me focusing on my phone in the cafeteria and walking towards the staircase when I bumped into that girl, and she falls down the chair. As I was focused on watching the story, I bumped into someone. I looked over and noticed the same girl who was my fifth interaction on Snapchat, and she had fallen down the stairs after bumping into me. She did not look like she was seriously injured, but I still apologized. It felt a bit weird to me, but I thought, it must just be a coincidence. I went back to class and asked my friend Jenny to show me her Bitmoji stories, and to my surprise, it was completely different from mine. After that, I checked a few more people's Bitmoji stories, but everyone had the same one, except for me. I could not understand what was going on, so I waited for the next story. The next story that I got was normal as everyone else's. So I thought, it really must be a coincidence, and I was just thinking way too much about it. Afterwards, I forgot about that incident and continued to live my life normally. But one day, when I checked the stories, it was with a person who was at the bottom of my interaction list. The stories showed me walking home with a grocery bag in my hand and stopping near the red light when he sees me and for some reason starts rushing towards me when he gets into an accident with a biker. I was in my home at the time, and to avoid this incident from happening, I sneaked out of my home and went to the park where I met Emily and started chatting. In the middle of my conversation with Emily, I completely forgot about the story, and when my mom called me and asked me to bring some stuff from the supermarket, I agreed. As I was walking home after buying the stuff Mom asked for, I saw David walking in the opposite direction as me, near the traffic light. I noticed the light turning red and him noticing me. It immediately reminded me of the story, so I started waving him to go away. But in response, he rushed towards me, and at that same time, a biker who was about to run past the red light hit him. I, including other people present, rushed towards him, and as he was bleeding badly, David was rushed to the emergency room immediately, and I contacted his sister to inform her about this incident. That was when my phone's notification bell rang. I opened it, and it took me directly to Bitmoji stories from earlier. There was another page update which had me waving hands towards him. This incident freaked me out completely, and I could not understand what was going on and what was wrong with Snapchat. I decided to not open these stories anymore, no matter what. So I did not open the next update. David was discharged after 2 days, and he had a few bruises here and there, and a wound near his shoulders. But there was not any serious or life-threatening injuries. But I still apologized to him for that, and in response, he told me that it was not my fault, and that I should stop blaming myself. The next day, as I was going to school, I accidentally stepped onto something, and immediately realized that it was a snake. For some reason, it did not bite me, and I was so freaked out that I didn't know what came over me. But I picked up the snake and threw it aside. A man was sitting over there, and the snake got curled up on his leg and bit him. I panicked and hid. The people around him rushed him to the hospital. But I could not stop thinking that it was all because of Bitmoji stories. I opened it only to see my story in which I'm walking and then stepping on a snake's tail. In the next few slides, it had it all, from me throwing the snake to it biting the man, and then me hiding afterwards. It scared me as hell, so I tried uninstalling Snapchat from my device, but for some reason it kept failing and did not uninstall. Instead of going to school, I rushed towards the repair shop and asked him to take the phone back. Surprisingly, they took it back without any questions and returned my money, after deducting the 20% from me using it till now, of course. I decided to never use any secondhand device and to ask my parents to buy me a new one every time. As I was exiting the shop, I noticed a girl walking in with a broken phone in her hands. I hope she doesn't buy the secondhand phone. I don't know why, but this random thought crossed my mind as I saw her.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Have you ever experienced something weird on Snapchat? As if it is being haunted specifically for you? Like filters acting up or some strange text being sent, and then the next second, there's no sign of it. No? Then hearing about the incident that I had through my Snapchat might make you look at it a bit different. I was going home after picking up my brother, Austin, from school, and on my way I bumped into a guy and fell, which caused my phone to break. I know I got hurt as well, but yeah, I was more worried about my phone because I bought that with my second or first salary, and for that reason, it held a great deal of value for me. After dropping my brother off at home, I immediately went to the repair shop and asked them to repair my phone. They took the phone and told me that they'll go through it and I can come back the next morning to pick it up. So I came back home and continued to spend my day as usual, but for some reason, it was going slower than my phone. The next morning, after getting ready and having my breakfast, I waited for the clock to hit 10, just so that I can run to the store and pick up my phone, and I did just that. But when I got there, they told me that some internal parts were damaged and they needed a replacement, which they did not have with them, so it would take a few more days for my phone to get completely fixed. They offered me a secondhand phone to use for the time being, which I took because my life without a phone was not going well. After taking that replacement phone and hoping for my phone to get fixed sooner, I headed towards the classes. I guess I forgot to mention that I'm a part-time tutor at a cram school and teach basic Spanish to younger students here. As I reached the cram school, I gave my entire focus to teaching, and as I was done with classes, I headed over to my brother's school to pick him up, as always. "Sis, can your phone get fixed?" he asked as we were walking towards home. "No, why are you asking?" I replied with a question. "Which device were you using earlier?" Instead of answering, he asked me another question. "It was just a replacement phone. Why in the world are you asking me these questions, mommy?" I said mockingly while laughing. Everyone in my class is doing this trend with this new Snapchat filter, so I was hoping I could do it with your phone. As he said that, I looked at him while smiling and said, "I don't know if this one is Snapchat, but you can check it out after finishing your homework, young man." He smiled to his ears after hearing this and nodded. The rest of the way home, he was cheerful, and unlike other days, he did not even tease me once. After reaching home, he quickly had lunch, and then we went to his room to focus on his homework. About 1.5 hours later, he came over to my room for me to check his homework, and in response to that, I gave him the phone. He told me that the phone did not have Snapchat, and he needed to install it, which I permitted him to do so. I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner while he was playing with my phone. My forgetful mind, I forgot to tell you this, well, I live alone with my brother, practically. I'm the one who's raising him after our parents' death, so every single burden comes over to my shoulder, whether it is to provide living, education, or something else. After the dinner was ready, I called Austin to eat. He came downstairs after a while and said while handing me the phone, "Don't delete Snapchat, sis. My friends always come up with new trends, so I might need it again." After saying that, he started focusing on dinner. One thing about Austin that I loved was that he never complained about my cooking, no matter what, and always finished his food silently. After Austin went to sleep, I went to my room to sleep as well, put the phone down on my side table, and fell asleep. When I was sleeping, I heard multiple snap sounds in my sleep, so I opened my eyes, only to see that there was absolutely nothing around. Thinking that it might be my imagination, I turned my head to the side and saw my phone screen light blinking. I grabbed it to check and got frightened by my snap in a haunted filter while I was sleeping. I threw the phone to the side, and after a few seconds, I went ahead to check again, and there was nothing there. No snap, nothing. I turned the phone off because I was scared and tried sleeping again. I could not sleep until 4 in the morning, and as soon as I fell asleep, my alarm clock started ringing. I opened my eyes to see that it was 7 a.m., Surprisingly, the phone was off, and when I picked it up from the bed, Snapchat was open. I hesitantly checked Snapchat and scrolled through it. In the process, saw an anonymous message which said, "Now it's your turn, doll." There was a weird horned laughing emojis that I had never seen in my entire life, and they disappeared only a few minutes after. Thinking it to be some weird prank by Austin, I went directly into his room and woke him up. He got up while rubbing his eyes, and when I asked him about them, he looked at my confused expression while denying any prank. I could tell that he was not acting, and he did not know anything about it. So I let it go and asked him to get ready for school. After dropping him off at school, I came back and started making lunch for myself, which was when I heard a snap around again. I turned and saw the phone screen, which was lighting up again and blinking at the same time. I hesitantly picked it up and looked at the screen. It was a snap of me cooking with a weird blood filter over it. The screen light closed and then opened up again, and the snap was gone. Instead, the Snapchat selfie camera was open and my face was showing up in it. I panicked, closed the app, and tried uninstalling it again, but for some reason, it wasn't getting uninstalled. I immediately ran to the repair shop and returned the phone. They told me that my phone was almost ready as well, and I could take it the following evening. That day, I decided to never use a Snapchat app, no matter what.
When you think LinkedIn, it's probably the last place you expect guys to be sending creepy DMs to girls. But sadly, and sometimes scarily, it happens with alarming frequency. It's a problem that me and many other girls have experienced while using the platform. So for a couple of years, me and a group of like-minded people have been campaigning for social media platforms to improve their privacy systems, including blocking and reporting methods to ensure the safety of women and girls online. But all my campaigning has been promoted by a very close call of my own. I work in photography. It's been my passion ever since I was a little girl, and I managed to get my hands on my mom and dad's old Polaroid camera. The digital revolution only made it even easier for me to practice my vocation, and by the time you get to the Galaxy S21 Ultra, mine's charging on my desk next to me, you can do almost everything a professional photographer can do with a device that can fit into your pocket. But there's something very authentic and gratifying about the old school darkroom processes, and it feels like you're birthing something special instead of just capturing a passing image. And although it's more expensive, I pride myself on offering my clients a choice of both. And a great way of me meeting new clients and potential employers is LinkedIn. It's honestly a great app, and I really do recommend it, but like I said, its user base contains just as many creeps as every other kind of social media. It might be a comment about what you're wearing in your profile picture, or asking, would you relocate for the right role, or the right man, winky face. Or in my case, it might be considerably more insidious and dangerous. Because one day I get a connect from a seemingly normal guy asking me if I'm interested in doing a photo shoot for him. I'm naturally a little bit skeptical, as he's being quite cagey about what the shoot entails, and the last time that happened, it turned out to be a couple wanting to take pictures of, you know. I give him my rate, and I tell him no nudity whatsoever. He then sheepishly mentions that some of the pictures would be topless, as they're for his wife, but promises no nudity or anything remotely sleazy. Handsome, but wholesome, I remember him saying. And I don't know, the effort he was going into making his wife happy, that did seem super wholesome to me. I guess I let my feelings speak for me, but I accepted his offer and told him that we could meet at some studio space I had a share in downtown. Public, neutral ground, on-site security, safe. At least I figured it would be, because if I'd had any inkling of what would be in store for me in that studio, I'd never have met that guy there that day. So, on the day in question, I met the guy at the studio space I mentioned. He looked kind of nerdy, curly brown hair, glasses, looking rather unassuming in his poorly fitted navy blue suit. He seemed really anxious too, like almost verging on innocent. He told me he'd never done anything like this before, and I really did believe him on that. Taking your clothes off for any reason can be very, very nerve-wracking, especially when the opposite gender is involved, which is half the reason I tend to avoid shoots like that. People's nerves are frayed around the edges, and it can make for a really bad atmosphere between you and the subject, which is the polar opposite of what makes a good photo shoot. But like I said, the fact this guy was really putting himself out there just to make his wife happy, God, I suppose that hit me right in the feels. I plugged the door code in, welcomed the guy inside the studio, and then asked him how he'd like to start. For example, if he might like a few professional-looking shots since he appeared to be in his work clothes. He says sure, and I try my usual technique of just chatting with the subjects while I'm shooting. This tends to make them feel at ease, and if you can coax a natural smile out of them and capture that on film, pure gold. They'll buy that shot every single time without fail. The shoot is going rather well. I'm getting absolutely no bad vibes off the guy, so I initiate a conversation about his wife that'll hopefully lead into some topless shots. At this point, I should really add that it was pure altruism that had me gunning for shirtless pictures, as I'm entitled to charge a premium for such shots, and the guy had agreed to that. If he turned out to be a creep, I could just avoid those kind of shots entirely, but since he'd yet to start acting weird, well, go figure. At first, the way he was talking about her was as sweet as I could imagine it would be. He was talking about how there was no one else in the world for him, that he'd known her for years before he'd finally decided to pluck up the courage to ask her out. He said she was everything to him, the first thing he thought about in the morning and the last thing he thought about at night. The only thing was, he didn't feel like he was man enough for her. He didn't feel like he projected the kind of masculinity she needed to stay interested in him. He'd said he'd been working out, watching his diet. He wanted her to find him sexy, not just cute, as he put it. And weirdly enough, I knew exactly what he was talking about, as it's something I feel like I've struggled with throughout my dating years. Sometimes you don't want to be mousy or adorable, you want to feel hot. You want people to burn for you. And with that in mind, I invited my subject to take his shirt off. The first thing I noticed was how true to his word he was about working out. I was shocked, but not entirely surprised. I mean, he had told me. But the thing that made me gasp was how his upper arms and torso were almost completely covered in tattoos, many of which looked like he'd done them himself. There was a handful of crudely inked pictograms depicting religious iconography from a variety of different Christian sects. But most of the tattoos were just short verses with markings underneath, and it was only when I looked through the lens of my camera that I realized that they were Bible verses. I'm almost completely stunned by what I'm looking at, but I do at least try throwing out a compliment, saying what you like about the presentation, the dedication to covering himself was admirable, to say the least. When I asked him which tattoos were his favorites, and that maybe I can work them into the composition, he pointed to one in particular. I had to look it up to get it exactly right, but it was this one. Genesis 2:24. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. He told me that's how he felt about his wife, that they were of one body and one flesh. But unlike before, when all of his romanticisms just came across as sweet and wholesome, I started to find his philosophy deeply disturbing. He started to flex, showing off his muscles, and trembling with raw power as he did so. I mean, he was ripped, frighteningly cut, only it wasn't attractive. It was starting to get scary. I started to get really nervous by the time he started to show off some rather weird-looking scars over where his heart was. At first, I thought it might have been chickenpox scars or something, albeit in a very localized place, I guess you could say. But he went on to tell me that he'd traveled over to Italy a few years prior to take part in a kind of religious flagellation ceremony where he and around 30 other men repeatedly stabbed themselves in the chest with a kind of needle comb. I don't have anything against organized religion as such. People are free to practice whatever they want, in my mind. But someone who hurts themselves because of how much they love God? I don't know. That just doesn't sit right with me. If there is a God, I don't think they'd want their children hurting themselves. Yet the thing that actually terrified me of the guy, not just nervous or cautious or whatever, was what he said towards the end of the photo shoot. I decided to ask him about his wife a bit more, just to kind of get him out of such an aggressive macho headspace. And that's when he started to giggle. I can barely describe how horrifying it was to hear such a childish, infantile giggle come out of such a monstrous form. And the more he talked, the more I realized something about his wife, and that's that he didn't seem to know all that much about her, only that he was counting on her being impressed by his topless photos, which by that point were far creepier than they were alluring. I wrapped the photo shoot up as quickly as I could after that. As much as they'd come on slowly, I never felt such a threatening aura come off of a subject in all the years as a photographer. He paid on time, left me a positive recommendation, and after that, I told myself I'd never have to deal with him ever again. But it was only later that I realized something truly terrifying about the guy, or rather, call it less of a realization and more of a theory. The way I see it, he didn't know much about his wife because they hadn't met. All he did know could have been gleaned from watching her, stalking her, and it makes me feel sick to my stomach thinking he might have used my pictures to, make a move on her or whatever. At least that's the nightmare scenario that plays itself out every time I think about it. I just pray that, or maybe in this case, pray would be the wrong word to use. I just hope that I don't read about my subject in the paper or online, and a story about the latest young woman to fall victim to obsessive male violence.